I could hear their footsteps before I saw them. Two police officers, strolling confidently toward me like they owned the place. Their heavy boots echoed against the concrete, their eyes scanning me with the kind of cold indifference I'd seen a million times before. "Excuse me, ma'am," Officer Carter said, his voice sharp, the type of tone you'd use when you were already sure of your authority. "I need to see your ID." I raised an eyebrow and glanced at my surroundings. It was just a gas station in the middle of nowhere, a quiet night. I was just trying to get back home after a long day of work. "Why?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though I could feel my heartbeat picking up its pace. He didn't answer immediately, just stepped closer, his uniform pressing against the cold air. "You look suspicious," he muttered, almost to himself. I bit back the sarcastic remark forming on my lips. Of course I did. Black woman at a gas station in the middle of the night. How typical. Without thinking, I reached for my phone in my pocket. Maybe it was a bad idea to escalate this, but I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. "I'm not showing you anything until you tell me why you're stopping me," I said, my voice calm but firm. Officer Morris, standing a few feet behind Carter, let out a low chuckle, clearly amused by the situation. "You got something to hide?" he asked, clearly enjoying his role. I didn't flinch. My hand tightened around the phone. They could harass me all they wanted, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I tapped the number I had memorized a long time ago, the Pentagon's hotline. I'd never had to use it, but tonight felt different. I could almost feel the tension in the air as I held the phone to my ear, waiting for the line to connect. Carter took a step back, his eyebrows furrowing in confusion as he saw me making the call. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Calling the Pentagon," I said without looking up. "What for?" Morris snickered, clearly assuming I was bluffing. "You'll see," I replied coolly, my eyes locking on his. I heard a click, followed by a calm voice on the other end of the line. "Pentagon hotline. How can I assist you?" I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves, and explained the situation. I could feel their eyes on me, and for a moment, I almost felt like I had the upper hand. Carter shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable now. He probably didn't expect anyone to push back, especially not a woman like me. He wasn't used to having his authority challenged. "Excuse me," the voice from the Pentagon asked, a clear sense of authority cutting through the conversation. "Please stay on the line. We're escalating this." I glanced up at Carter and Morris. Their expressions were a mix of confusion and panic. Carter tried to take a step toward me, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I warned. My heart was still pounding, but now it was different. It wasn't fear anymore. It was power, the kind of power that came from knowing I was in the right. The line went quiet for a moment, and then the voice returned, this time with a firmness that left no room for argument. "Ma'am, we've logged the incident. Officers, you are being investigated for misconduct. Please release the woman immediately and return to your squad car. Further actions will be taken." The air seemed to freeze, and I could hear the officers' breaths catch in their throats. Carter's face turned pale as he glanced at his partner, who was now visibly sweating. "Are you serious?" Morris muttered, looking around like he was about to be caught in a lie. "Yes," the voice on the other end confirmed. "Proceed with the appropriate actions, or further charges will be filed." Carter stood there for a moment, the color draining from his face. I could see the tension in his posture, the way his hands twitched as if he wanted to react, but he didn't. He knew he was out of options. He turned to Morris, who just shook his head, and with that, they both stepped back, still glaring at me, but not daring to make another move. "You're free to go," Carter muttered, his voice cold, the authority in it gone, replaced by the recognition that he had lost. I nodded, not saying a word, and turned to walk away. As I walked past them, I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had. One. The power had shifted, just like that. I could hear Carter and Morris muttering behind me, but it didn't matter. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the truth on my side. The truth had made them back down, and for once, it felt good to know that I wasn't the one who had to apologize. I reached my car, unlocked it, and got in, my fingers still shaking slightly, but this time with a sense of pride. As I started the engine, I let out a long breath and drove off into the night, the sound of my tires against the asphalt a reminder of the victory I had just claimed. As I drove away, the world outside seemed to shift in a way I couldn't quite explain. The night air rushed through the cracked window of my car, the hum of the engine blending with the sound of my racing thoughts. My heart was still pounding from the tense standoff, but now it felt different. I had stood up for myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The incident at the gas station would be something I'd remember for the rest of my life, but it wasn't just about the officers anymore. It was about what had happened next. The power had shifted. I was no longer the one being silenced. I wasn't sure what to expect when I reached home, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this go. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the lights flickering in my kitchen. The house was quiet, too quiet. I parked the car and turned off the engine, my thoughts returning to the call I had made. The voice from the Pentagon was clear and firm. I hadn't expected them to follow through, not so quickly. But they had. They had logged the incident, and now it was real. Something bigger was going on. As I walked up to the front door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out and saw the number, unknown to me. I hesitated before answering. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ms. Williams, this is Lieutenant Green from the Pentagon. We need to speak with you as soon as possible. There are developments regarding your call." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. "Can you meet us tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We have some important information that involves your case." My breath caught in my throat. What could this mean? I had barely gotten any sleep that night, my mind racing as I tried to process everything. The officers, the call, the Pentagon. It was all happening so fast, and I had no idea how deep this was going to go. I didn't know whether I was ready to dive into this, but I had no choice now. My actions had set something in motion, and I wasn't going to back down. The next morning, I stood in front of the building, my nerves running high. The tall glass doors of the Pentagon loomed ahead of me. It felt surreal, like I was stepping into a world I wasn't meant to be a part of. But here I was, standing outside, waiting to find out just how far this would go. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The lobby was pristine, polished floors reflecting the bright fluorescent lights above. As I approached the desk, a security guard eyed me carefully before motioning for me to follow him. He led me through a series of hallways that felt almost endless, each turn more surreal than the last. Finally, we arrived at a conference room. The door was already open, and inside sat 3 people I didn't recognize. One of them, a woman with sharp features and a serious expression, stood up as I walked in. "Ms. Williams, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat," she said, gesturing toward an empty chair at the table. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. "We've reviewed your case," the woman continued, "and what you did was exactly what we needed. Those officers were part of a larger network of misconduct that's been under investigation for months. Your call was the trigger that brought their actions to light. We have gathered enough evidence now to move forward." My mind was racing. I had no idea this was all connected. "What does this mean for me?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with questions. The woman paused, exchanging glances with the 2 men who were sitting beside her. "This could mean significant changes. These officers are just the beginning. Your call to the Pentagon has opened up a much bigger case, one that could go all the way to the top. We'll need your help moving forward, Ms. Williams." My breath caught. I hadn't expected any of this. I had just been trying to stand up for myself, but now it seemed like I had inadvertently uncovered something much bigger. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. The woman leaned forward, her voice soft but serious. "We need you to testify. We need you to help us expose the full extent of what's been going on. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to work with us, we believe we can bring about real change." I sat there in stunned silence, processing the weight of what she was saying. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about something far bigger, something that could change the course of everything. My life had just taken a turn I hadn't expected. I could feel the tension in the room, but I also felt something else, a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about standing up to those officers at the gas station. It was about standing up to an entire system of corruption, and I wasn't going to back down now. "I'll do it," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. The woman nodded, her eyes meeting mine with a look of approval. "We'll be in touch soon." "Thank you, Ms. Williams. You've done more than you know." I stood up, my legs still shaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. As I left the Pentagon building, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of fear and excitement. This was just the beginning, and I knew it was going to be a long road ahead. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking it alone. I woke up early the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the window and casting soft shadows across the room. I stretched, feeling the weight of the day ahead settle over me. Today wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. But the choice was made. I had stepped into a world far bigger than myself, and now I had to play my part. The Pentagon had already made their move, and I was about to take my first steps into a larger battle. As I got dressed, I found myself staring at the reflection. In the mirror, I hardly recognized the person looking back at me. A woman who had stood up to two police officers, who had unknowingly triggered an investigation into a deep-seated corruption. A woman who was now being asked to step into something even bigger. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't have a plan. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to back down. I grabbed my purse and left the house, the weight of the situation pressing down on me as I drove. The world seemed quieter today, as if it knew something had changed. As I reached the meeting spot, I parked my car and took a deep breath, feeling the tension start to build in my chest again. I was nervous, yes, but there was also a sense of determination. The building loomed ahead, and I knew that what happened inside was going to change everything. When I stepped into the building, I was greeted by the same woman from yesterday, the one who had been so serious. Her name was Agent Claire Matthews, and she gave me a tight-lipped smile as she gestured for me to follow her. The hallway felt sterile, lined with white walls and dim fluorescent lights. I could hear my footsteps echoing in the silence as I walked beside her. "We're ready to move forward, Ms. Williams," Agent Matthews said, her tone clipped and professional. "This is bigger than we originally thought. We've found connections to a series of cases involving corruption, misconduct, and abuse of power." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. This was what I had been waiting for, but now that it was here, it felt more overwhelming than I had imagined. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Agent Matthews paused, then turned to face me. "We need you to testify, not just about your experience, but everything you know about the officers involved. Their connections, their behavior. We need it all." I took a deep breath, absorbing her words. The magnitude of the situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even just about those two officers. This was about uncovering a network of corruption, about exposing what had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what lay ahead, but I knew I couldn't turn back. "Okay," I said finally, my voice quiet but resolute. "I'll do it. I'll testify." Agent Matthews nodded, a look of approval crossing her face. "We're going to need you to be strong. This won't be easy, and there will be resistance. But if you help us, you're not just helping yourself. You're helping a lot of people who have suffered in silence for far too long." I nodded again, my mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? Was I really ready for this? But even as doubt crept in, something inside me told me that this was the right thing to do. "We're going to put together a case, Ms. Williams," Agent Matthews continued. "We'll be in touch with the details. In the meantime, we'll need you to stay low. Don't talk to anyone about this. If you need anything, contact us immediately." "I understand," I said, feeling a chill run through me. This was real now. There was no going back. Agent Matthews gave me one last look, a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're doing the right thing. We'll handle the rest." I walked out of the building, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on my shoulders. The sun had started to set, casting a golden light over the city, but it felt like the world had become a little darker for me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. As I got back in my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just begun. This wasn't just about justice for me. It was about something much bigger, something that would change everything. I wasn't sure how this would end, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right side of history, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me now. I sat in my car for a few minutes after leaving the building, trying to let everything sink in. The weight of what was happening still hadn't fully hit me. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I wasn't just someone who had witnessed something unfair and walked away. I was part of something much bigger now, something that could change everything for the people who had been silenced for too long. The case wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the truth, about standing up to a system that had failed far too many. I had made a choice. I had taken a stand, and now there was no turning back. I knew it was going to be tough, but what scared me the most was the uncertainty. What if they came after me? What if they found a way to shut me down? I didn't know what was coming, But I wasn't going to let that stop me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, seeing the name that I had hoped wouldn't call me. Officer Mark Jenkins. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of whether to answer. I wasn't sure what he wanted, but I couldn't avoid this forever. I tapped the screen and answered the call. Ms. Williams, it's Officer Jenkins, he said, his voice calm but strained. I'm sure you know what's going on right now, and I just want to apologize for how things went down the other night. His words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected this. Apologize? I echoed, trying to keep my tone neutral. For what? For harassing me. There was a pause on the other end, and then he spoke again, his voice softer. I didn't want things to escalate like that. I didn't know who you were, what you had done. I never meant for it to get out of hand. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been dealing with this my whole life, being looked down on, dismissed, and disrespected, but now, here he was, calling to apologize. But it wasn't a real apology. It didn't feel genuine. You didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I repeated, my voice rising. You think this is about just that one night? This is about years of people like you doing whatever you want and getting away with it. There was silence for a moment, and then Jenkins spoke again. I know what I did was wrong, and I'll accept whatever comes next. His voice was flat, like he had given up on himself. I've been reassigned, Ms. Williams. I'm not going to be working in the same unit anymore. I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was quickly overshadowed by anger. That's not enough. You don't just get to walk away from this. You don't get to just disappear and think everything's okay now. I ended the call without another word, feeling the rush of emotions course through me. This wasn't enough. It wasn't justice. It was just another way for them to sweep it under the rug, to pretend like nothing ever happened. I needed more. I wasn't going to let this go until I had the answers. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello. Ms. Williams, it's Agent Claire Matthews, came the familiar voice. I just wanted to let you know we've made some significant progress. We've gathered enough evidence to move forward with the investigation. My heart started to race. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. What does this mean? I asked, barely able to keep the excitement out of my voice. It means we're going public with the information, Agent Matthews replied. This is no longer just about a few rogue officers. This goes all the way to the top. We've identified a network of corruption that spans across several departments, and now it's time to bring it all to light. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was real. This wasn't just a fight against the two officers who had harassed me. This was something much bigger, and I was right in the middle of it. We'll be in touch soon with the details, Agent Matthews continued. But for now, we need you to remain safe. Don't talk to anyone about what's going on. If anyone contacts you, report it immediately. I understand, I said, my voice steady, but I could feel the tension in my chest. This wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. I ended the call and sat back in my car, looking out at the city around me. Everything felt different now. The weight of what was happening was starting to settle in, but there was something else too, something stronger. There was hope. Hope that the truth would finally come out. Hope that the people who had been wronged would get the justice they deserved. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. And it was just the beginning. I hadn't expected it to be like this. After Agent Matthews' call, everything had shifted. I thought the hardest part was behind me. The fight at the gas station, the call to the Pentagon, and the decision to speak out. But now, sitting in the conference room with the agents from the investigation, I could feel the gravity of it all bearing down on me. The room was sterile, quiet. The kind of silence that spoke louder than words. I was alone in a way I hadn't been before. This wasn't just about me anymore. The case had snowballed into something much larger, something that involved a network I never could have imagined. Agent Matthews had been clear. This was bigger than a few bad cops. There were people in high places, with power and influence, who had been pulling strings for years. I could almost hear the weight of their words as they echoed in my head. This will change everything, they said. We just need you to testify. Help us connect the dots. The thought was overwhelming. My hands trembled as I reached for the glass of water in front of me. I'd never been one to back down from something I believed in. But this was different. The stakes were higher. I had always known that there was something wrong with the system, but now I was standing at the very center of it. The fight had just begun. But it wasn't just about police misconduct anymore. It was about justice for so many who had been ignored, silenced, and left to suffer in the shadows. As I sat there, I tried to focus on the task at hand. "Ms. Williams," Agent Matthews said, breaking my thoughts. "We've gathered significant evidence, but we need you to testify. It's the only way to make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug." Her words hit hard, but I nodded. This was my chance to do something bigger than myself. Something that could finally make a difference. I could feel the weight of the decision. My heart pounded in my chest as I thought of everything that had led me to this moment. The years of silently enduring injustice. The way people like me were treated as invisible. The way I'd been forced to hide in the shadows. Now, I had a chance to bring the truth to light. I could feel the fight within me rising. It wasn't just about revenge or justice anymore. It was about breaking down the walls that had kept people like me silent for so long. I had the truth. I had the power to expose it. But I wasn't naive. I knew the risks. They wouldn't go down without a fight. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. The next few days felt like a blur. The investigation moved quickly. Every meeting, every call, felt like a step closer to something monumental. I stayed in close contact with the agents, providing every piece of information I could. They were careful with how they handled the case, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. I was part of something much bigger now, and I could feel the weight of that responsibility every day. It was strange. The fear I had once felt, the doubt that had gnawed at me, had started to fade. I wasn't alone anymore. The truth had a way of binding people together, and I had seen that firsthand. The agents were determined, just as I was. We were in this together. But I couldn't ignore the sense of danger that loomed over us. The people we were going up against weren't ordinary. They had power, connections. But that didn't matter. The more I learned, the more I understood just how deep this went. It wasn't just a few bad officers. It was a system that had been broken for so long that it was almost unrecognizable. I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency, like we were on the edge of something huge. But every step forward brought new challenges. There were whispers, questions, people asking if we were really going to do this, if it was worth it. I had no answers, only the belief that it was the right thing to do. The more I pushed forward, the more I realized there was no going back. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that gas station weeks ago. I had changed, and I could feel that change in every conversation I had, in every decision I made. When the time came, I would stand up in front of a courtroom, and I would tell my story. But it wasn't just my story. It was the story of so many others who had been silenced. And no matter what happened, I wasn't going to stop fighting for them. For all of us. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The days leading up to the trial felt like a blur of endless paperwork, late-night phone calls, and preparation. I had spent weeks gathering information, meeting with Agent Matthews and the rest of the team. Every conversation, every meeting, brought us closer to exposing the corruption that had been festering in the system for so long. But the closer we got, the more I felt the weight of what was at stake. This wasn't just about the officers who had harassed me at the gas station. It was about everything. About a system that had systematically failed so many people, people who had been ignored, mistreated, and abused for far too long. And now, I was in the middle of it all. I wasn't just testifying for myself. I was doing this for everyone who had ever been silenced. The morning of the trial arrived, and I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The nerves were still there, but they were different now. I had become someone else over the past few weeks, a woman with a purpose, with a voice that could no longer be ignored. As I drove to the courthouse, I couldn't help but replay everything that had led me here. The phone call with the Pentagon, the late-night meetings with the agents, the moments when I had felt doubt creeping in. But those moments had passed. I was ready. The courthouse was busy, the hallways filled with people rushing from one place to another, lawyers, reporters, security. I had expected it to feel more overwhelming, but instead, it felt oddly calm, like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Agent Matthews was already waiting for me when I arrived, her expression serious but reassuring. "You're doing the right thing," she said quietly as she handed me a folder filled with the case details. "We've got your back." I nodded, trying to steady my breath. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. We walked into the courtroom, and I was immediately struck by the size of the room. The judges' bench loomed high above, and the jury sat waiting. their faces a mix of anticipation and skepticism. I couldn't help but feel the weight of their eyes on me as I made my way to the witness stand. I had prepared myself for this moment, but standing there, under the harsh fluorescent lights, I realized there was no way to truly prepare for something like this. The prosecutor stood beside me, his voice calm but commanding as he addressed the court. "Ms. Williams," he began, "thank you for being here today. We know this is not easy, but your testimony is crucial to understanding the extent of the corruption we're dealing with." I nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. I had to stay calm, focused. I couldn't let my emotions get in the way. As the trial progressed, the defense tried everything they could to discredit me. They attacked my character, tried to twist my words, and made it clear that they would stop at nothing to protect their own. But I didn't flinch. Each question, each accusation only fueled my resolve. I was telling the truth, and I wasn't going to back down. The day stretched on, each hour feeling like an eternity, but I kept my focus. I was starting to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who had been treated unjustly, about exposing the lies that had been hidden for far too long. When it was finally time for me to step down from the witness stand, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The hardest part was over. The jury would decide, but I had done what I came to do. I had stood up for myself, and for everyone who had been silenced. I walked out of the courtroom, Agent Matthews by my side. The weight of the past few weeks still lingered, but there was also a sense of hope. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I didn't know what the outcome of the trial would be, but I knew one thing for sure. Things were changing. The truth had been spoken, and no matter what happened next, it would never be the same again. I sat in my car, staring at the courthouse from across the street, the sun beginning to set behind the towering buildings around me. The trial had ended, and now all that was left was waiting. The outcome was uncertain, but I had done my part. The courtroom had been a battlefield, and I had stood firm, facing down the defense's attacks with nothing but the truth in my corner. My testimony was now in the hands of the jury, and I could only hope they would see it for what it was, justice. I had come this far, but the weight of the whole situation was starting to settle in. There was so much more to this case than I had realized. The officers I had called out, the corruption they were part of, it was bigger than anything I had expected. I had uncovered something much more dangerous than a few bad cops. I was part of an investigation that was digging into the heart of a broken system, and now I was a target. But I couldn't back down. Not now. The phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking me out of my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Ms. Williams," a familiar voice said. It was Agent Matthews. "We have news. The jury has reached a verdict." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know whether to feel nervous or relieved, but I had to stay focused. "What did they say?" I asked, my voice steady despite the growing tension. "We won," she replied, the words heavy with meaning. "The officers involved have been convicted, and the investigation is moving forward. But we're not done yet. This is just the beginning." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. A rush of emotions flooded over me. Relief, joy, and even disbelief. It was over. The fight I had started was winning. But Agent Matthews was right. This wasn't the end. It was only the first step in a long process. I had stood up to the system, and it had fought back, but we had won. "What happens now?" I asked, my mind already racing toward what came next. "We move forward with the rest of the investigation," she said. "There's still a lot more to uncover, but the conviction sends a strong message. We'll be in touch with the next steps soon." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you," I said softly. "You don't have to thank me," she replied, her voice warm. "You did this. You were the one who stood up and made the difference. We just helped you along the way." I hung up the phone and sat there for a few moments, processing everything. The world felt different. Lighter, in a way. The truth had come out, and for once, the system had been held accountable. I had done what I set out to do. As I pulled away from the courthouse, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. There was still work to do, still so much to uncover, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the right side of history. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just the woman who had been harassed at a gas station. I was someone who had made a real difference, who had taken a stand against something that was wrong, and won. I drove home in silence, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the people I had met along the way, the agents, the lawyers, the people who believed in me. They had all played their part in this victory. But it wasn't just about the people who helped me. It was about the people who had been wronged for so long, who had been ignored, who had been silenced. This was for them too. The road ahead would be difficult. I knew that. There would be more battles, more obstacles, more challenges. But now I knew I could face them. I could stand up and speak the truth, and I wouldn't be silenced again. I wasn't just a part of the system anymore. I was changing it. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a moment, letting everything settle in. The world outside was still, but inside, everything had shifted. The future was uncertain, but it was brighter than it had been before. I stepped out of the car and looked up at the sky. The stars were starting to appear, small and bright against the darkening sky. I smiled to myself. There was still a lot of work to do, but I had already made history. And that was enough to keep me going. I woke up the next morning feeling different. The world seemed quieter, more purposeful, like I had crossed a threshold and was now walking in a new direction. The events of the last few weeks had unfolded so quickly, but they had changed me in ways I couldn't quite describe. I had always been the type of person to shy away from confrontation, to keep my head down and avoid making waves. But now, standing tall in the face of adversity, I felt empowered in a way I had never felt before. It was strange, this sense of empowerment. I had been through so much, facing off with the officers, being thrust into a much bigger investigation, and now testifying in court. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was part of something much larger. I stood in front of the mirror as I prepared for the day ahead, adjusting my shirt and smoothing out the wrinkles. There was a time when I would have been scared to speak out, afraid of the consequences. But not anymore. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who had been silenced, for every person who had been ignored by the system. And that was something worth fighting for. I walked to my car, the crisp morning air filling my lungs as I drove to the next meeting. I had been getting calls every day from Agent Matthews and other officials. They were moving quickly now. The officers involved were already facing charges, and the investigation was gaining momentum. But it wasn't just about the officers anymore. The system, the structure that allowed them to operate with impunity, was the real target. I was starting to realize how deep this went. The higher-ups who had turned a blind eye, the departments that had allowed corruption to fester, it was all coming to light now. And I was right in the middle of it. The next meeting was at an undisclosed location. The agents were being cautious, careful not to tip off anyone who might be involved. When I arrived, Agent Matthews greeted me with a nod. "We've made some progress," she said, her tone steady. "The investigation is expanding. We've uncovered connections to several other cases of misconduct and corruption." I felt a chill run down my spine. The more we uncovered, the more it felt like we were on the edge of something enormous. "What does this mean?" I asked. "It means we're not stopping here," she replied. "The people we're going after are powerful, but we're going to make sure they face the consequences." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't just about taking down a few bad officers anymore. We were going after a network, a system that had been built on exploitation and control. The next few days passed in a blur. Meetings, phone calls, strategizing. I found myself pulled into a world I had never imagined, a world where every move was calculated, every decision could change the course of everything. But despite the pressure, I felt a sense of purpose that I had never known before. I was part of something that mattered, part of something that was bigger than me. The trial was still fresh in my mind. The victory, the conviction, it had felt like a turning point. But now, as I sat in the quiet office, I realized it was just the beginning. The real work was yet to come. It wasn't just about the officers who had harassed me. It was about exposing the corruption, the lies, the abuse that had been allowed to thrive for far too long. And I was the one who had helped bring it to light. The feeling of accomplishment was overwhelming. But it wasn't enough yet. We hadn't won the war, only a small battle. The system wasn't going to change overnight, but we had cracked the door open, and that was something. As the days passed, the investigation continued to unfold. More arrests were made. More information was uncovered. The public began to take notice, and the pressure on the officials involved grew. It was amazing to watch, knowing that I had played a part in it all. But even as things moved forward, I couldn't forget the people I had met along the way. The agents, the lawyers, the victims. They had all become part of my journey. And in a way, we had all become part of something bigger. The next few weeks felt like a blur of meetings, paperwork, and strategy sessions. But through it all, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what we had accomplished. We were making a difference. Slowly but surely, the system was starting to change. I wasn't sure where this journey would take me, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down. This fight was just beginning. I woke up early the next morning, the weight of everything still pressing heavily on my chest. It had been weeks since the trial ended, but the effects of everything that had happened still lingered. The victory felt like a distant memory at times, like it belonged to someone else, someone stronger, someone braver. But then, I would catch myself, standing in the mirror, walking to my car, and remember that it was me. I had done it. I had made it through. The aftermath of the trial was quieter than I expected. There were no grand celebrations, no cheers from the public, but the quiet sense of accomplishment was there, always in the background, like a constant hum. I had given my testimony, and the officers who had harassed me were convicted. That alone should have felt like enough. But now, as the investigation continued to unfold, I realized that this was only the beginning. The system had been cracked open, and there was still so much more to uncover. As I drove to meet Agent Matthews, I couldn't help but reflect on the weeks that had passed. I had expected everything to change immediately after the trial. I thought that once the verdict was delivered, the world would be different. But the truth was, the world wasn't going to change in an instant. It was a slow process. It was going to take time, effort, and, most importantly, people willing to fight for it. And that's what I was doing now, fighting. The streets were quieter than usual as I arrived at the meeting place, a nondescript building tucked away on a side street. Agent Matthews was already there, standing outside, her expression unreadable as always. She nodded at me as I approached, and we walked inside together. "We've made progress," she said, her voice steady. "But there's still more to do." "What's next?" I asked, my voice a little shakier than I wanted it to be. But the reality of what I had gotten myself into was starting to weigh on me again. "We need to keep digging," Agent Matthews replied. "We've got enough evidence to go after more people, but we need to be careful. There are powerful people involved in this, and they won't go down without a fight." I nodded, trying to focus. The stakes were higher now. The investigation wasn't just about exposing a few bad officers anymore. It was about taking down an entire system of corruption, and I was a part of that. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I wasn't just a victim of a broken system. I was helping to bring it down. "Do you think we'll win?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I hadn't even realized how much doubt had been creeping into my mind. "We have to," Agent Matthews said, her voice firm. "There's too much at stake. We can't let them win." Her words were a reminder that this was bigger than me. This was about all the people who had been ignored, all the lives that had been ruined by the system. I wasn't just fighting for my own justice anymore. I was fighting for all of them. The next few days were a blur of activity. The investigation was moving forward, but it felt like we were taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Every time we uncovered something new, it seemed like there were even more secrets waiting to be found. It was exhausting, but it was also motivating. Each new discovery only fueled the fire inside me, pushing me to keep going. But as the investigation grew, so did the pressure. I started to feel the weight of everything I had uncovered, everything I had exposed. It wasn't just the officers anymore. It wasn't just about the people I had seen at the gas station. It was about an entire system of corruption, and I was right in the middle of it. I started to wonder what would happen when it all came to light. What would happen to me? What would happen to the others who had spoken up? The fear wasn't something I could ignore, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I had already made the decision. There was no turning back now. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Agent Matthews. "We need you to meet us," she said. "It's time." My stomach dropped. Time for what? I had no idea, but I could tell from the urgency in her voice that this was it. This was the moment everything had been building toward. I got in my car and drove to the meeting spot, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What was about to happen? What would this mean for the investigation, for the people involved? When I arrived, Agent Matthews was waiting for me, her face tight with tension. "It's happening," she said quietly. "We're moving forward. This is the final push." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. This was it. We had reached the point of no return. The investigation would either succeed or fail, and everything I had worked for would come to a head. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to stop. I had come too far, and the truth had to be heard. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything I had fought for, everything I had exposed. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The truth had come this far, and I wasn't backing down now. I walked into the conference room, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment we had been working toward for weeks. The room was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation, the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on me. Agent Matthews was already there, sitting at the table with a few others, officials, investigators, all of us part of the same mission. I could feel the tension in the air as I took my seat, my hands trembling slightly. "We've made our move," Agent Matthews said, her voice steady, yet there was a hint of urgency in it. "This is it." I nodded, trying to calm my nerves. I had been in high-stakes situations before, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt like it could change everything. "What's the next step?" I asked, my voice a little rougher than I wanted it to be. Matthews exchanged a look with the others, then turned back to me. "We go public," she said. "We take everything we have and present it to the media. The officers involved, the network we've uncovered, the system that allowed this corruption to thrive for so long." My stomach twisted at her words. Going public meant everything would change. The spotlight would be on us, on me. The truth would no longer be just something we whispered about in secret. It would be out there for everyone to see. There was no going back after that. "Are we ready?" I asked, looking around the room. The others nodded, their expressions serious but determined. "We are," one of them said, a hint of confidence in his voice. "We've gathered enough evidence, and the momentum is on our side. The media is already asking questions. Now, we give them the answers they've been waiting for." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The air in the room felt thicker now, the pressure building with every passing second. I wasn't just testifying anymore. I wasn't just a witness. I was helping to expose something bigger than myself. The people who had been living in the shadows for too long would finally be seen. The system that had ignored them, exploited them, would no longer be able to hide. "Let's do it," I said, my voice firm. "Let's show them the truth." Matthew stood up, signaling the others to follow. "We'll move fast. The media will be waiting for our statement, and we need to make sure everything is lined up before we go public. It's time to take this fight to the next level." I followed them out of the room, the weight of what we were about to do settling heavily in my chest. This was it. No more waiting, no more second-guessing. The truth was about to be exposed, and nothing would ever be the same again. As we stepped into the hallway, I felt the pressure mounting, but there was something else there, too. A sense of determination, a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt before. We were on the edge of something huge, something that could change everything. The world outside the building felt different as we made our way to the media room. The streets were crowded, the noise of the city buzzing around us, but inside, everything felt like it was in slow motion. I kept my focus on the task at hand, blocking out the noise, blocking out the fear. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. It was about standing up to the system, about showing the world that things could change. We reached the media room, and the cameras were already in place. The reporters were ready, the lights flashing as they adjusted their equipment. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, but I kept my head high. This wasn't the time to shrink back. This was the time to speak out. Matthew stepped up to the podium first, her voice cutting through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We are here today to reveal the truth, to expose a network of corruption that has been allowed to thrive for far too long. We have the evidence, and we are ready to present it to the world." I stood beside her, my hands clenched at my sides, but I knew I couldn't back down. I was here for a reason. I was here to tell the truth, to make sure that the people who had been silenced would finally be heard. The reporters began firing questions, each one more urgent than the last. "How long has this corruption been going on?" one of them asked. "What do you expect to happen next?" another inquired. Matthews answered each question with confidence, her words sharp and to the point. I stayed silent for a moment, watching as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. And then, when the moment came, I spoke. "This system is broken," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "For too long, people like me have been silenced, ignored, dismissed. But no more. We're here to show the world the truth. We're here to make sure that the people who have been wronged for so long finally get the justice they deserve." The room went quiet for a moment, and I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. This was it. The truth was out, and there was no going back. As the questions kept coming, I knew that this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over yet, but we had taken the first step. We had opened the door, and there was no closing it now. I walked out of the media room, the weight of the press conference still hanging in the air. The flashing cameras, the constant barrage of questions, it had all been overwhelming, but it was also a reminder of just how far we had come. The truth was out now. People were listening, but the reality of what was to come settled in quickly. The next steps would be harder than anything we had faced so far. The investigation was growing, but so was the resistance. The system that had protected these people for so long wasn't going to crumble overnight. The truth had been exposed, but that didn't mean the fight was over. As I left the building, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the glass doors. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. It wasn't just the clothes or the way my hair was styled differently, but something deeper. I had been a quiet observer of the world around me for so long, and now I had become part of something bigger, a part of a movement that was going to change everything. I wasn't just standing on the sidelines anymore. I was in the fight. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see an unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello, Ms. Williams," came the voice on the other end. It was Agent Matthews. "We need to talk. It's urgent." My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's been a shift," she said, her tone serious. "The people we're up against, they're pushing back harder than we anticipated. We have reason to believe they're trying to undermine the investigation. We need to move faster." My heart started to race. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. "We keep pushing forward," she said. "We can't let them stop us now. The momentum is on our side, but we need to stay ahead of them. The truth is out, but there are still people who want to bury it. We need to make sure they don't succeed." I took a deep breath, the reality of it all settling in. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about the trial or the officers. It was about everything. The system we had been fighting against, the people who had been wronged, all of it was on the line. "I'm in," I said, my voice firm. "We'll do whatever it takes." "I knew you would," she said. "I'll send you the details. Be ready." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. This was the moment we had been preparing for. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. I looked up at the sky, the sun dipping lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. I had no idea what the next few days would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stop now. We had made it this far, and we weren't backing down. The battle was far from over, but I had found my purpose, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me from seeing it through. I had a choice now: to stay silent, to go back to the way things were, or to keep pushing for change, for justice. And I chose justice. I chose to keep fighting. The stakes had never been higher, but the truth had already changed the course of everything. Now, it was time to finish what we started. I sat in the small, dimly lit room, my eyes scanning the file in front of me. The pages were filled with details, names, dates, everything we had uncovered so far. But the more I read, the more I realized just how deep this went. The people we were up against weren't just powerful, they were connected in ways I never could have imagined. Corruption, deceit, manipulation, these were the forces we were fighting, and we were only scratching the surface. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, but I couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything we had been through. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Agent Matthews. "We need to move quickly," she said, her voice sharp. "We've just received word that they're trying to cover their tracks. They know we're onto them." My heart skipped a beat. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice tight. "We push forward," she replied. "We can't let them get away with this. We have the evidence, and now it's time to use it. We need to expose everything, and we need to do it now." The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. "I'm ready," I said, though I wasn't sure if I really was. But I had no choice. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about survival. "Meet me at the safe house," Agent Matthews said before hanging up. I grabbed my coat, the weight of the situation still heavy on my mind. The quiet in the room made everything feel even more intense, like the calm before a storm. I drove through the streets, my mind racing with the possibilities. What if we weren't ready? What if we were too late? I shook the thoughts from my head and focused on the road ahead. We had come this far. We couldn't stop now. When I arrived at the safe house, Agent Matthews was waiting for me. She looked up from her phone as I walked in, her face still set in that familiar, serious expression. "It's time," she said, standing up and grabbing her jacket. "We've set everything in motion. We need to get to the press conference before they do." The press conference. The moment we had been waiting for. It was our chance to expose everything. The officers, the network of corruption, the people who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. It was our opportunity to take the power back. "Let's do this," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves that were still there. We drove to the location in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, I could feel the tension in the air. The press was already gathered, waiting for the truth to be revealed. The moment was here. This was the culmination of everything we had worked for, everything we had uncovered. But as I stepped up to the podium, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. I had been here before, standing in front of the press, ready to share my story. But this was different. This time, it wasn't just my story. It was the story of everyone who had been wronged by the system. It was the story of every person who had been silenced, ignored, or oppressed. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was all of ours. I took a deep breath and began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," I started, my voice steady but strong. "Today, we stand at a crossroads. The corruption that has festered in our system for so long is finally being brought to light. We have gathered the evidence, and we are here to make sure that those who have abused their power will be held accountable." The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could feel the reporter's eyes on me, waiting for the next part, the part that would change everything. "This is not just about a few bad officers," I continued, my voice rising with conviction. "This is about a system that has failed the very people it was supposed to protect. It's about the network of corruption that has been allowed to thrive, unchecked and unchallenged, for far too long." I paused, looking out at the crowd. I could see the skepticism in their eyes, but I wasn't going to back down. This was the truth, and the truth had to be heard. We've seen the way the system has treated people like me, like so many others. We've seen how the powerful have been allowed to do as they please, while the rest of us are left to pick up the pieces. But today, that changes. Today, we take back control. Today, we stand together and demand justice. I could feel the energy in the room shift. The reporters were no longer just spectators. They were part of the story now. The truth was out, and they had a responsibility to tell it. "This is just the beginning," I said, my voice steady, but my heart pounding. "The fight is far from over, but we've taken the first step, and we're not stopping until we've seen it through." As I stepped down from the podium, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had been revealed, and there was no turning back. The battle was far from won, but I knew we were on the right side of history, and that was all that mattered. I stood in the quiet of my apartment, staring out the window at the city below. The streets were alive with movement, but I felt like I was suspended in time. The press conference had come and gone, the truth now out there for the world to see. But with every moment that passed, the weight of what we were fighting for settled deeper in my chest. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. It was only just beginning. The victory we had celebrated earlier that day felt distant now, like it had been a dream. The weight of the consequences, the people who would try to stop us, the system that was going to fight back, it all started to sink in. The calm after the storm was always the hardest part. My phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Agent Matthews. "We need to meet." Her voice was calm but urgent. "Something's come up. It's time for the next phase." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "I'll be there," I said, hanging up without another word. The drive to the meeting place felt longer than usual. The streets that had seemed so familiar now felt strange, as if I was entering uncharted territory. I thought about everything that had happened, the decision to speak out, the press conference, the stories that had been shared, and I realized how much my life had changed in such a short time. When I arrived, Agent Matthews was waiting outside, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. "We've made progress," she said as I approached. "But we need to move faster. The people we're up against are scrambling. They're trying to cover their tracks." My heart skipped a beat. "What does that mean for us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It means we need to make our next move now, she replied. We can't let them get ahead of us. We have to stay on the offensive. I felt the familiar pressure rise in my chest. This was the moment I had been preparing for. It was time to take the next step. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady but with a hint of determination. What do we need to do? We need to take this to the next level, Matthews said, her tone serious. We need to go public again. Expose more of what we've found. It's not just about the officers anymore. It's about dismantling the system that's been protecting them. We can't let this slip away. My heart pounded. It wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about a few bad officers. We were going after something much bigger. Something that had been broken for far too long. The fight wasn't just mine, it was ours. I nodded. Let's do it, I said, and the weight of the words felt different now. It wasn't just a decision. It was a commitment. We left the building, making our way to the car. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel the tension building. The closer we got to the next location, the more real it all felt. We were on the brink of something monumental. As we entered the media room, I was struck by how different this felt compared to the first time. The reporters were ready, their cameras trained on us, their microphones raised, waiting for the next big piece of the puzzle. I had been here before, standing in front of the media, speaking my truth. But now, the stakes were higher. The story had evolved into something that could change everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthews began, stepping up to the podium, her voice calm but filled with authority. What we are about to reveal goes far beyond the corruption of a few officers. This is about the very system that allowed this to happen, a system that has been built on lies and deceit. I stood beside her, my hands clenched at my sides. The room was silent, every reporter waiting for what would come next. We have uncovered a network of corruption that spans across multiple departments. It's not just about the officers who were arrested. It's about the people who protected them, who allowed them to operate without consequence, Matthews continued. We have the evidence, and today, we're going to show you everything. The room went still, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The reporters' eyes were locked on us, their pens ready to write down the truth. This isn't just about one bad apple. I spoke up, my voice steady and clear. This is about a broken system that has been allowed to operate unchecked. For too long, the truth has been hidden, but now we're here to bring it to light. We're here to make sure the people who have been silenced finally get heard. The room was electric with energy, the reporters asking questions, demanding answers. I answered each one with a calmness I hadn't known I was capable of. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the truth, about taking down the system that had allowed so much pain to exist in the shadows. When the press conference ended, the weight didn't lift, but it felt different. The truth was out. There was no going back now. The fight had just begun, but we had taken the first step. We had exposed the darkness, and now it was time to bring it into the light. The road ahead would be long and hard, but I wasn't afraid. I had made my choice, and I wasn't backing down.